نعلم حكمتها أو نجهلها. ثم الصلاة والسلام على الذي بعث رحمة للعالمين خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Sisters and brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. في وصية أو رسالة لأخيه محمد بن الحنفية يقول الإمام الحسين صلوات الله وسلامه عليه: إني لم أخرج أشرا ولا بطرا ولا ظالما ولا مفسدا، وإنما خرجت لطلب الإصلاح في أمة جدي رسول الله، أريد أن آمر بالمعروف وأنهى عن المنكر. Imam Hussein salawatullah salam alayhi met his half-brother once in Medina and once in Mecca. In Mecca, just before he departed from Mecca towards Kufa, and gave him or advised him when he asked why is he leaving Mecca towards Kufa. He said that the main reason for my revolt is not to be vain, unjust, corrupt, or despotic, but to reform the Ummah through the process of Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar. Last night, I left you with few points to remember. Number one, I advised that to avoid feeling disconnected with the life of various Imams, because their strategies seem to be slightly different from each other. My recommendation was to look at the life of the Imams in their totality, from the moment that Imamah becomes necessary, which is after the demise of the Holy Prophet on the 10th or just beginning the 10th of after Hijrah, until 260, which is the martyrdom of Imam Hassan al-Askari. That's 250 years. One reality exists, and that reality, we call it the Imam. That reality has to deal with a number of forced circumstances in their life, imposed on them by the despotic rulers of the day. And naturally, as these conditions change, the reaction of this reality, call it Imamah, changes as well. Once we approach it this way, then the strategy of Imam Hassan, with the strategy of Imam Hussein, with the strategy of Imam Zain al-Abidin and the rest, they are not disconnected, but they are simply various phases and approaches that they have due to the circumstance. The second point was that all Imams, after the demise of the Holy Prophet, if Saqifa had not taken place, and there was an orderly transfer of position and power from the Holy Prophet to the Imams, naturally Imams would have continued with the path that the Holy Prophet has already established and taken the community to the Ummah to higher level. But with the advent of Saqifa, and the disruption that took place, Imams became conscious of two responsibilities. Number one, to avoid what we call deviation from the right path, and ultimately destruction of Islam, and also to struggle and do everything possible that one day make all the effort to reclaim power one day, if the conditions are right, if there were enough people to be around. This is why we see in the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen, salawatullah salamu alayhi, immediately after the demise of the Holy Prophet, there is not enough individual. For 40 days, he and Fatima al-Zahra, salamullah alayha, they would go through the Medina, reminding people of the Ghadir, their allegiance to the Holy Prophet, their allegiance to the Amir al-Mu'mineen, hoping that enough people will stand up with Ali to reclaim power. But at the end of the day, only 5 people were there. Salman, Abu Dhar, Miqdad, and few others. That's it. Nobody else was prepared to stand up, even within the family of the Imam, Ibn Abbas and the rest of them. Nobody was prepared to come. So Imam realized that the effort to reclaim power in the absence of what we call political base is not going to be possible. The only focus would be to focus on preservation of Islam and the protection of it from deviation, etc. So he withdrew from the public life and focused on writing the first tafsir, etc., etc. Once Uthman was killed, and there were enough people coming to him in a revolution and uprising against the Khilafah, there was enough people, and in his sermon clearly indicated, when there are political base, there are enough individuals, then we should rise to reclaim power and get it to the right path. But unfortunately, this power base lasted only a few years with the war and everything else. First Aisha, then we had Muawiyah, then we had Khawarij. And once after he was assassinated or martyred, Imam Hassan lasted 6 months. The notion of claiming power ended. Until Imam Hussein realized that the effort by Yazid to deviate Islam and destroy Islam is too great a risk for Islam, and he had to rise. But after every effort that has been made by other Imams are within this confinement of protecting and preservation of Islam and making sure that one day when there is enough political base, then they would rise. That never happened. So reclaiming power was a component of Imam Hussein's uprising. When Imam says, وَإِنَّمَا خَرَجْتُ لِطَلَبِ الْإِصْلَاحِ فِي أُمَّةِ جَدِّ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُرِيدُ أَنْ آمُرَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَالنَّهْيَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ, indirectly saying, if you don't have power, you cannot encourage people to do good, and you discourage them from doing evil. Indirectly saying that for Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar, I need power. The desire to reclaim power is a major component of the uprising. Otherwise, society cannot be corrected. Islah is not going to happen. Then somehow the process of reform is not going to happen if you don't have power. I also ended with 2 statements last night, both from Sayyid Qutb and Ayatollah Khamenei regarding our responsibility in the contemporary world. Now we are dealing with the neo-Jahiliya, and neo-Jahiliya is a toxic environment that we really need to confront. Khamenei is the one that who said, left the community, the youth community, with 3 advices or 3 major factors. Number 1, our imams must be dealt with, or at least brought to the attention of the world, but the spirituality, the seerah of the imam, but particularly focus that the best opportunity for confronting the corruption and corrupt world will be through the commemoration that we organize for Ashura. Why? Because if we are going to challenge injustice, where better than when we are talking about Imam Hussein, who says, I'm rising up against injustice. This is the best opportunity. When you talk about justice and injustice, then naturally it will be the best opportune moment to challenge al-tariq al-muthla, the excellent lifestyle that the corrupt, toxic world today is trying to impose on everybody else. So we Muslims in general, and Shias in particular, we have a mission to present an alternative way of life to the corrupt way of life being imposed on us. If we don't, as I indicated a few nights ago, our children will have to confront and deal with this corrupt way of life without having the necessary tools and means to be able to deal with it. Many years ago, I think it was during the 1980s, in Alberta, Canada, a mosque was built by the Muslim community, and they invited 2 speakers to come as a speaker for opening session of the mosque. The Premier of Alberta and a scholar, Islamic studies scholar. The Premier of Alberta praised the Muslim community that, look, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you only had 5 lawyers, 2 doctors, 1 accountant, and 2 pharmacists. Now look at the number of doctors that you have, engineers that you have, pharmacists that you have, and how prosperous the community has become, focusing on material gain. When the Islamic studies scholar delivered his own lecture, he had a scathing attack against the Muslim community. Why? He said, you as Muslims did not come to this country just purely to become successful in material life. As Muslims, you have a mission in this society to provide an alternative way of life when the life becomes corrupted. And you didn't do that. You focused on purely the material issue. Where is the way of life that you are going to give as an example to the rest of the community? We have failed. So if we don't use occasions such as Moharram, lectures that are being organized, while we are talking about justice and injustice, then when are we going to talk about the reality that is confronting us and the unjust world that we are going to deal with? If you look and read Khutbah Arafah, when Imam Hussein in Arafah before he left Mecca, he has a scathing attack against the ulama and the scholars of the day, and he says, ألا ترون أن الحق لا يعمل به وأن الباطل لا يتناهى عنه. You dropped the ball. You are allowed, by going back to sleep and being indifferent to the reality outside, you literally gave Bani Umayyah the power to decide on behalf of everybody else and to be in control and make a decision for everyone else. It's your responsibility. You did not use the occasion the way it should, to be able to deal with the reality outside. And as a result, you allowed this power, Yazid, Bani Umayyah, and everybody else to have absolute power. Now, so the world in front of us, and unfortunately, I mean, I have gone to many mosques, Islamic centers, and so on during the month of Muharram. Nobody talks about this kind of things. Nobody is prepared to say, look, the world in front of us is divided into two opposing camps. A Western-style powerhouse that wants to dominate the world, and there are those that intend to resist and oppose it. In a nutshell, every crisis that we have around the world boils down to the confrontation between these two camps. And this is an old age confrontation of haqq and batil. It started from Prophet Adam, and it goes until the end for eternity, until the end of time. What we say that in every era, there is a Karbala, and there is a Yazid, and there is a Hussein. Where do we stand vis-a-vis the unjust world that is in front of us? This is something that we have to pay attention to. Domination versus resistance. Yazid wanted to dominate, Imam Hussein resisted. Yazid was on batil, Imam Hussein was on haqq, at least according to our own tradition. The Sunni tradition disagrees and says that no, because Imam Hussein rose against the established order, he deserves to be killed. So Shayateen al-Ins wal-Jinn, that 2 nights ago I was talking about them, once you allow them to have power in their hand, they are not going to relinquish power unless there is a confrontation, sacrifice, and a struggle to reclaim power. The reason why Ahlul Bayt failed in reclaiming power, because there was no power base. People were not prepared to stand up with them. Remember the story that I told you last night regarding Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq and Zurara and the person who came from Khurasan. Imam said, if I had 100 people like him, I would rise. So the notion of reclaiming power as a base to reform society always has been in the mind of our Imams. So we are confronted with the neo-Jahiliya, and we get together and we talk about Muharram and go through it, we don't do anything. I never forget a sight that I saw in 2009 in Najaf. A picture of Aza, people who are commemorating the Ashura, in the shrine court, beating their chest and going through the whole process, while the American GI was standing on the top of the shrine with his gun. Nobody asked, okay, how can we accept this reality? Imam Hussein rose for liberation against established tyrannical despotic powers. How do you accept the relationship between the gun of a foreign gun on the top of the shrine standing looking at you while you are going through the Latmiya and everything else? This is the classic example of the hadith that at the end of time, Akhir al-Zaman, Islam becomes inside out. We focus on superficial issues, while the spirit of Islam, which is resistant, liberation, and everything else, nobody pays attention to. In our life, inshallah, tomorrow night we discuss this, because it's this notion of assimilation and accommodation that comes in. In Islam, well, we have this relationship The West claims that secular civilization represents the highest level of human intellectual level. And it requires a secular mindset to detach, and constantly they talk about this, to detach humans from what we call faith and religion. Religion has to be pushed back into private affairs. That is what the West says. In Islam, the world and the universe is deliberately created system and have values and meanings when connected to the source of reality, when it's connected to Allah. Now you begin to see the conflict. To the West, there is no single source of moral values beyond humans' own rationality. To Islam, Allah, the sole creator of the universe and everything else, is the source of moral values and good and evil. How do you compromise between the two? If we don't talk about them in our gatherings, how do you want our children to go out and be able to discern what is good and what is evil, or accept the Islamic principle? To the West, good and evil are relative terms forever changing according to the mood and requirement of human. Something which is forbidden today, 5 years from now, it becomes permissible. Determined by their own reason and self-interest. I decide what is good and what is bad. During the war on Iraq, occupation of Iraq, the moral concept was whatever is beneficial for us, the United States, it becomes moral. Self-interest. And humans, they define their own good and evil based on pursuit of happiness, what makes them happy. That's the West. Islam's happiness is gained by the submission to the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How do we compromise? Where is our mission here? What we have is two powers, and they are competing for space. If we don't organize ourselves, we will be totally smashed and crushed and without power. Quran says, وَأَعِدُّوا لَهُمْ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُم مِّن قُوَّةٍ. The verse in the Holy Quran, prepare yourself. When you understand that there is a confrontation between you as Muslims, Islam, and there is an external force, then prepare, have power. We see, because we are marginalized, and we don't have to provide any power, our leaders are assassinated, our peoples are slaughtered, destroyed, our houses are all destroyed, our lands are occupied, and we have to either accept it or perish. When are we going to talk about our future in this country? Some people resort, well, we need to join this party and that party, but joining the party, you have to ultimately pay lip service to the policy, as we have seen it in the previous elections. Nobody changed anything. Muslim figures come in, but reality, nothing has changed. Imam Hussein salawatullah salam alayhi in day of Ashura said, "Ala inna ad-da'i ibn ad-da'i khayyarani bayna ithnayn, bayna as-sallati wa ad-dalla." Either to fight or capitulate and perish, being humiliated and disgraced. This is the challenge in front of us. We need some kind of a map to be able to navigate ourselves in the crisis. And the best opportunity that we have is when we commemorate Imam Hussein salawatullah salam alayhi and use the universal values existing in the messages of Karbala to be able to deliver the message and inform everybody else of what is going on. We go back to that Islamic scholar. We focus purely on the material. We become doctors, engineers, pharmacists, dentists, and everything, materialistically prosperous. But as Muslims, have we succeeded in trying to create an alternative modality or a way of life to the corrupt and toxic way of life outside? At least for the sake of our children. We let them grow like mushroom, and then when they reach the age of 15, 16, they come home and say there is no God. We panic. To commemorate, so commemoration of Ashura should be a setting in which these crises are discussed and a roadmap developed through brainstorming, consensus, etc., etc. Where do we go from here? Inshallah, we try our best to inform whether we will be able to do much during one session or two sessions. That's far-fetched, but at least we really need to be mindful of our responsibilities in this society. We have a mission. Let me remind you of a story, the first migration that took place in Islam from Mecca to Habasha. When Ja'far ibn Abi Talib and a group of Muslims went to Habasha, because the Holy Prophet commanded them, you are going into a land where the governor or the king is just. So they go over there. When Quraysh sends an envoy to go and bring these people back, Najashi, or the king of Habasha, says, I cannot make a judgment unless I bring both parties together. So he invited representative of Quraysh and representative of these the Muslimin to come to a meeting in his palace. The leader of the Muslims that were present was Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, the brother of Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah salam. And others were present, so allowed the Quraysh to lay down their claim, then turned to Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, what is it? He said, our Prophet, this is a message. Our Prophet commanded us to come to this land based on the fact that you are a just ruler, so that we can practice our faith under your justice and freedom that we have. For what purpose? By living here, we can show to the community that there is an alternative lifestyle, an alternative moral principle. You can choose it, but at least we present it to you. Ja'far ibn Abi Talib says the purpose, an alternative lifestyle. Are we creating an alternative lifestyle? Let us pray that might Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala miraculously might change things. First of all, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the return of our living Imam and as soon as possible, whether we will be privileged to be among his followers and his supporters, that's a different story. We also ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant the wishes and of those people who are sick, ill, and they are desperate, particularly people of Gaza, which every day there is an atrocity against them and genocide and massacre after massacres. May Allah accept our prayers and our du'as. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.